AI happens pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, it might just pass you by.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reasoning Show. I'm your host, Brian Gracely, and today I have reason to be slightly concerned that many companies out there are not well prepared for the onslaught of sort of shadow IT, the things where your organization has people that are trying out new AI tools. They want to be productive, but they might be doing some things that could cause you some potential harm to the company, potential loss of data, potential loss of information. And how do we go ahead and get our hands around that? So today we're going to dig into that with the good folks from Torii right after the break. Today's show is sponsored by Nasuni. There's a growing gap in AI right now between what's possible in theory and what successfully works at scale inside an enterprise. The difference comes down to unstructured file data. Many AI initiatives struggle because the file data they depend on is scattered, unstructured, and disconnected from where and how work actually happens. Nasuni changes that. It brings your unstructured file data into a single, secure foundation so AI, both generative and agentic, can access it with the context, governance, and performance it needs in production. Bring AI to where your unstructured data lives. See what it takes to activate your data for AI and request a demo at nasuni.com/AI. Today's show is sponsored by ShareGate. You're out of time. Copilot needs to be deployed ASAP, but your tenant really isn't ready for it. Years of data, permissions, and users lurk in its shadows, ready to be exposed by AI. ShareGate Protect sees it all, so you can find the exposure risks, fix them fast, and deploy AI with confidence. Microsoft 365 Governance, they've got this. Learn more at sharegate.com/protect. And we're back, and today excited to dig into a topic that I know that we've talked about a decent amount on the show, but also I know a lot of the audience is kind of exploring and also struggling with to a certain extent, and that is how do we keep up with what we oftentimes call shadow IT, or this idea that the people within your organization are leveraging AI tools as they learn about them, as they find out about them from friends and colleagues. They're trying to make lives easier. But sometimes that can make things difficult on your IT team, your security team, your compliance and auditing groups. And so today, excited to have Uri Haramati, who is CEO of Torii, joining us. Uri, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we dig into sort of all things around these sort of evolution of shadow IT and shadow AI, give us some of your background and really what your focus is these days at Torii.
All right. So I'm Uri, the co-founder and CEO of Torii. And the quick version is I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built a couple of companies in the past. And pretty much in my previous company, I was the early adopter of software. I love to use the latest tools, encourage everyone to use the latest technologies. And as the company started growing, it became harder and harder to manage everything and control everything. Talking about more than 10 years ago. And that was the first wave of the SaaS sprawl back then. And that kind of led me to start Torii, which started as a SaaS management platform. We help companies manage all their SaaS tools, taking over control again, saving spend, reducing risk, being more operational efficient. And as the time went by, and obviously in the last 2-3 years, AI tools got into the mix. And that's the next step of what we see with enterprise software. It's pretty much what we've seen back then when SaaS started exploding, but in a very, I would say, exaggerated or more challenging environment. So that's Torii, and we help companies with managing all these tools.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And that was really kind of one of the first couple of questions I wanted to ask you is, having come from a place in which you were dealing with SaaS sprawl. Obviously, we saw tons and tons of interesting SaaS applications, some very large, some very small. Are you seeing a difference in the pattern with how these AI tools are coming into environments? Are they coming in faster than before? Is there a different adoption mechanism or pattern that you're seeing that's making you even rethink, how you were managing SaaS adoption?
Yeah. So it's definitely coming in faster. And there are two reasons for that. One is friction and the other one is blast radius. So when you think about installing a SaaS or using a SaaS tool, it required more in terms of sign up and connecting to your systems and so on back, if you look 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Now with AI tools, the time to value is much faster, and you connect it to your environment in seconds, and you get some generative AI that can create amazing value in minutes, and then it's already in your system, and it's much, much faster. And there's another thing, that these tools are really game changers in everyone's life and in everyone's job. So we are just looking for these tools that can really change our jobs dramatically. You didn't have such an effect with SaaS when SaaS started exploding.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that makes sense. SaaS was nice. It helped you build some to-do lists, or it did whatever it did. This almost feels like, oftentimes a superpower, or you're able to do what you took a day to do is now taking you a couple of hours or a few minutes to do. So yeah, I can see that taking off. What are you seeing as you're engaging with either, existing companies or new companies? What are you seeing as some of the early kind of red flags or warning signs that people are coming to you and saying, hey, we think we might have a problem, or we need to kind of have better visibility as to what people are doing, because either they're worried about data loss, or they're worried about cost, or something else? What are some of the early signs that sort of draw you into engaging with them?
Yeah, so you mentioned one very important first step, which is visibility. And most of them don't have visibility into what's going on. So they figure out about the challenges of AI sprawl a bit too late. It's either now you realize that ChatGPT is connected to half of your systems, or they realize that the tokens for Claude are increasing much more than they thought they would. And then they think, okay, now we need to understand even who's using Claude and who's using Claude Code and where these tokens are running. And it's very hard to get that visibility, because maybe people signed up to different accounts. There are no central account. And if there is a central account, you'd understand the tokens for which project does it go. So loss of visibility or loss of control is the first part. And it's either coming from the spend. You have the customers that are already spend-oriented. They see the cost increase of a certain tool, or those that are really, they care about security, and then it's usually with access management. All of a sudden, where does it go? Who has access? And to what does it have access?
Do you find that, I find in talking to people that, especially from a cost perspective, if somebody says, hey, we're using Claude, or we're using, one of the OpenAI tools, or it feels like there's a certain amount of, because like you said, because they seem to get sort of so much benefit right away, oftentimes they might be like, well, I don't know if I want to expense that $20 a month, or I may not want to expense that $100 a month because it's making me look so good at work. If that cost isn't coming back to the company, if people aren't sort of expensing it, or like you said, they don't have a central, is there sort of a technical profile, a traffic profile that also becomes, a visibility thing that people could see? They're seeing, more traffic out to certain APIs, or what's the way that you can kind of get visibility if you're not seeing it from a cost perspective?
So cost is definitely one way of identifying these things. And definitely when you follow the money, you see what people are using. But when you start seeing connections, right? So let's say, for example, you are Google Shop, right? And you use Google Workspace. If you start seeing who connected Claude to your Google Workspace, then you can start understanding where does it go and how much it's being used. Or if it's ChatGPT connected to your Slack. And there are different ways for us and also our customers to identify what is being used through, let's say, OAuth, right? If you connected different things to your Slack environment, Torii gets it from Slack API. And now you know that 70 people in your company connected ChatGPT to Slack, right?
Yeah.
And that's in 2 clicks, they get it connected. Some companies didn't block it, or they did block it. And that's one way of seeing it non-related to cost.
Right. One of the challenges I have to imagine is, how do you, and I'm trying to think of the right way to sort of phrase this, is people oftentimes feel very empowered using these tools, whether they're sort of doing it according to company policy or kind of going around company policy. How do you find, you can enable your customers, your companies to sort of, continue to allow the innovation to happen, continue to allow the productivity to happen without sort of being the bad guy and just turning things off or being, the department of no? How do you find that right balance between those two things and not upset your users who are, trying to make the business better?
I must say that if a company thinks that if someone in the company feels that they are not in a good balance, it's okay. Everyone feels the same these days. And you feel that on one hand, you want to enable and you want to use these technologies. On the other hand, you have a great fear of how it's going to affect and how to stay in control.
Right.
And in a way, it's not that different from what we've seen 10 years ago with SaaS. Or if you think about the move to the cloud, when companies are adopting these so many tools, when you had shadow IT and people start using different tools to make their job better, they had good intentions. You use shadow tools because you want to be more productive, right? But the challenge was hard, and then there was a balance to manage. Now it's amplified because the power or the multiplier of these tools can bring into the work are so much more than what we've seen with traditional SaaS.
Right.
And also the speed of innovation, it's like something we've never seen before, right? The tools of a few months ago are so different from today. And if what you called an agent a year ago is something completely different today. So then what's going to be tomorrow? So let's say if you think about a few months from now, they're going to have to think about how they handling OpenClaw and agents that can do a lot. And now we've seen on our latest research, 10% of companies already have OpenClaw being used in the company. That's an amazing type of agent, but it's also very, very dangerous if you either don't know how to use it, or we also, as people, don't know exactly what are the limits or how to make it more secured. So every day you hear and you see people that are, this is how I made my OpenClaw more secure, this is how, and then you get the security company or the cyber companies, this is how we penetrate OpenClaw.
Right.
So, and that did not exist 3 months ago.
Right,
so
exactly.
Speed is so fast and the changes are so fast.
Yeah, it is a really interesting paradigm because, like you said, the speed of it's so fast because, so you put people in the challenge of just keeping up with what's new. You probably could go around to, 50% of the people that you engage with and go, do you know about OpenClaw? Do you know what it's doing? And it would be like, no, I haven't heard of it yet. Oh, well, it's 3 months old. And, in the past you could get away with being like, I had no idea 3 months went by. I was busy with stuff.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting in the context of, we're used to giving people productivity tools. I mean, you could give somebody, access to Microsoft Office, or you could give them access to, some sort of sharing tool like SharePoint or Slack or something. And there's really kind of only so much, so many sharp edges that can go along with that. And then you unleash a tool like OpenClaw, and, the number of things that it feels enticing to sort of go, well, let me just give it my access to my email. Let me give it access to, a number of things that you're like, yeah, just go do that busy work. I don't really want to do it. But if you're not knowledgeable, you sort of realize, no, I opened the front door, I opened the back door, I opened the windows, I opened all sorts of things to the business that I had no idea I was doing. Like you said, we've never really had something that was sort of equally as powerful, but equally as potentially problematic at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting paradigm.
Totally. And we don't have best practices for that.
Exactly.
Right? You can't have best practices for 3 months old technology. Nobody knows really how it's going to be used. I can give you an example of how I approach that in our company. And so I have 2 forums that I'm leading starting somewhere early 2024. And one of them is the AI ambassadors, and one of them is AI committee. The AI ambassadors, these are the early adopters of AI on different departments. These are the builders, those that can start vibe coding, they can use NA10, they can launch agents. And these are people that It can be a content writer on the marketing team. It can be a solution engineer on the sales team, and it can be an engineer that is an early adopter of AI. And on the AI committee, that's me, security, IT, and legal, which is where we try to look for the next frontier and get ready for that. So in 2024, it was, okay, vibe coding is coming. Let's see how we are doing the right process for that. And then agents are coming. And now, for example, just in the last week or two, we had discussions of, okay, in a few months from now, there's going to be OpenClaw. How are we going to do that? So I'm already starting using it, and I'm one of the examples. I'm the early adopter. I'm one of them. This is where we should get ready. This is what we should pay attention for. This is where the gaps are. And then try to be ahead of the curve with the rest of the company when we see technologies that are coming AI.
No, you point out a really important thing, and I'm seeing this at another number of companies and a number of my colleagues. They're basically setting up similar types of things. It's like, oh, you've got 15 minutes of expertise around that. Cool. You're now a leader, and I need you to find 5 people and get them up to speed on what you're doing. And then we're going to kind of diffuse that across the company, because otherwise there's just no way to sort of take these sort of new ways of doing things and not have them become really fragmented, but also just, not make half the team feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. And you're like, no, you're a day behind. You're a week behind. We'll get you up to speed. And no, that's really, really important. I want to come back to sort of the world that you guys live in. Some of this feels a little bit like an evolution of something like DLP or data loss prevention, governance. How do you have to rethink what that looks like, where the leak is now a prompt as opposed to a file? How much do you have to change your technology to really be looking into what's kind of passing back and forth across the network?
Yeah, that's a big difference. I mean, you think about traditional DLP, it was built for the world where data moved in files or attachments or uploads or database exports, and you put controls on the perimeter, email gateways, endpoint agents, and things like that. And AI break this model entirely, right? And the new risk is what people type, right? Not what they upload, and how it's all connected. And then what happens inside the browser, inside the OAuth, inside different tokens that data is going between each other. And your DLP gateway doesn't see the prompt typed in the AI tool, right? Yep. It doesn't see that. So control needs to shift from the point of input, right? You need to know which AI systems your employee are sending data into, right? And what permissions those systems have. I'll give you an example where access management and role-based access or groups are much more important than before. So for example, when let's say you have a Google Drive in your company, and a person that shouldn't have access to a folder have access to that folder. Most chances that they won't even know that. They won't even find this folder. They don't know about it. They never seen it. But now when the entire Google workspace is connected to ChatGPT, and that person is asking a question that uses Google Workspace data, ChatGPT can go over all of Google Workspace, right? And can get data from these folders that user shouldn't have access to, right? Yep. And you don't even know that. And you don't know where AI will get the data from. You don't have any control over that. Access of people and later on also non-human identities becomes much more critical. And this is also why non-human identities is becoming a new and more important domain on access management.
Yeah. No, I'm almost hesitant to ask you this question just because, as we talked about, things are changing so quickly. New things are coming out. Have you started to establish, as you're having a conversation with somebody, what does well-governed begin to look like? I mean, what does, as of April 16th, when we're recording this, like what does a best practice look like? Or do you feel like you're having to ask people to be a little more flexible, a little more elastic than maybe they had to be in the past as new things are happening?
Like the ideal scenario is that well-governed system is invisible to the employee, right?
Yeah.
We all want like, I click somewhere, I have what I need, I ask for data and I get it, and I don't get anyone asking me questions and everything is being taken care of. That's obviously the North Star, the goal from employee experience. And part of the way to achieve that, I see two main components, or maybe three. One of them is continuous discovery and mapping. Continuous discovery and mapping of what's being used, how it's being used, what's connected to what, human identities, non-human identities, what agents are running, and you need systems for that. You can't do it manually anymore. The other part is well-built automation. So automation that takes care of policy enforcement, that takes care of onboarding and offboarding, who has access to what, if someone is changing departments to make sure that all their access are changed so they don't get access to different folders. And the last one is treating non-human identities as a new type of identity. I mean, we always had it before, like you had system accounts for years, but now it's becoming something completely different and on a different scale, right? I may have, in the past, I could have 1 or 2 system accounts for a SaaS tool. Today, I might have 3 agents running and 5 tokens on OpenAI and 3 tokens on Anthropic to do each one on a different workflow, an agentic workflow, an agent, an OpenClaw. These are all needs to be assigned to humans. And this is something that is critical, that every non-human identity will have a human owner.
Yeah, and that starts to become sort of an interesting challenge. I've seen a number of sort of demonstrations of situations in which you give an identity or you give an agent your sort of credentials and say, hey, go off and do these tasks I do all the time. And there are plenty of scenarios in which they run into a problem. Maybe they look at the thing that you've asked it to do. Maybe they're thinking about it. They think about it differently than you would have. You don't necessarily even realize that. And then they sort of run into a roadblock. Oh, I couldn't get to that file. I couldn't reach this resource. And they kind of go into Leroy Jenkins mode where they're like, okay, I'm going to figure out a way to go solve this problem. Are you seeing people start to understand that connection between, yes, this is an agent acting on behalf of somebody, but at the same time, like maybe you don't want to give that thing all the same credentials or the exact credentials that human upstream had?
Yeah, I think we are all a little bit still confused of how we should treat these agents in terms of access or in terms of permissions, right? So should I create another email for that thing? Should I create another account for that? Right. Or should I give it OAuth with minimal permissions? There are different ways to approach it. I think the bottom line or what the people should remember is that you want the permissions or the access of that non-human identity, whatever that is, to be very clear to you and to be very transparent to everyone that needs to audit it, right? And now it's not the case in most cases. Nobody knows what have access to what and what permissions does it get. And as you said, if I want to get something to work, I'll get it work. And especially now with agents and now there's Ralph Wiggum loops that are running like, I'm going to accomplish this mission, whatever it is. Or if you think about Cloud Code or OpenClaw, that will just decide, I'm going to download some libraries in order to do that or install the software in order to achieve whatever. That's next level of completing a task with autonomy and taking decisions during that. So there's also the non-deterministic part of it that we are not used to, right? Yeah. You don't know exactly what it did, and a single prompt can go through different paths.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I want to ask you one last question because I know your time is valuable. I want to be conscious of that. I'm always continue to be, even though and you and I are both of a vintage that we've lived through a few of these trends and these waves before. I'm always trying to kind of get a sense of like, okay, how does this new trend look like the previous variation of the trend that we saw before, and then you try and figure a little bit about timing and behaviors and so forth. Do you get a sense of we went through previous shadow things in the past, whether it was just, sort of shadow bring my own Wi-Fi into the office or shadow IT or, the things that happen with the cloud. Do you get a sense of how fast at some point companies always sort of adapt their behavior to go, okay, I got to find that right balance. I'm going to bring in the right tools to do it. Are they doing it faster in this new AI era yet? Or are they still, because the technologies are moving so fast, they're not sure yet? I'm trying to kind of get a sense of what inning are we in terms of shadow AI and how are people behaving accordingly?
I think we will still be seeing, we'll still be chasing it. And that's going to be the default. I can tell you that we did a huge research on our customer base that we released the benchmark for SaaS and shadow AI. And only 15% of the tools were sanctioned by the IT, 15% of the tools that are being used. And we're talking about 40 tools per employee, 800 tools in the enterprise. These are staggering numbers. And in the last 2 years, we've seen 700 new AI apps it was in the last year alone.
Wow.
So new tools that were being created. So SaaS sprawl helps us adopt technologies faster, under control, right? Mm-hmm. But the speed, as I mentioned earlier, is much faster, and we are trying to get in front of it. But I think it will always be the same, that it's going to be much easier to adopt a new tool than changing the company's process.
Right, absolutely.
And that will always be a balance to manage and something we will always be chasing.
Yeah,
I don't think we're going to see it different, but we need also to see the positive side of it, right? The positive side, when someone is using this new technology or shadow AI, shadow IT, it's because they want to do their job better, right? They want to be more efficient. If they didn't care, they wouldn't use it. And there's a positive. I wrote an article a few years back on the good, the bad, and the ugly of shadow IT, and it's the same with shadow AI. There's some good in it, in all the challenges and all the bad and ugly.
Yeah, and it's, it is very, reminiscent of, like you said, we've seen this movie before. The movie right now is playing at about 2x speed, what we're used to it usually playing at. But yeah, it is very much a balance between, people being very rigid about saying, nope, we can't do this because, I read somewhere that something bad happened, or, I'm paranoid that this thing's going to happen. And those are useful things to have, especially if it's your job to be security for the company or auditing for the company. But yeah, I think it's equally important to have that sort of positive piece of it, because people are trying to be more productive at your company. They're trying to make the company better. They're trying to, go home to their families and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely a balance to be found. Yuri, with that, I want to wrap up there. I want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic insight, both into, the mindset that you're seeing with people, the numbers that you guys are seeing with your research, and we'll try and get some links to those in the show notes. But just kind of taking your perspective on, a phenomenon that we've seen. Like we said, we've seen parts of this movie before, but we're seeing it at such a rapid pace this time that it is very different. It's not just a sequel. It's, sort of a sequel times 10 and to a certain extent. So Uri, thank you so much for your time, folks. I want to thank him for his time. I want to thank him for his insight, and we'll put links in the show notes to both reach out to them and engage with the team if this is a problem that you have, which more than likely you do have, whether you recognize it or not. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for telling a friend about the show. Thanks for helping us spread the word and grow in the community. And with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Check us out online at reasoning.show for all things reasoning. And leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the show.